is a version of farming that most of us understand pretty easily. Maybe it's a little cliche, but we understand this. Grow food, harvest it, you sell it, and if things go well, maybe you grow a little bit more. We also understand, especially if we've been following along here, that there are challenges along the way. But what happens when things go really well? Because at some point, growing a successful farm can actually mean spending less time farming. You're listening to One Bite is Everything, connecting the food on your plate to the bigger world through farms like the one you'll hear about today, policies, menus, conversations with thought leaders of all kinds, and more. I'm your host, Dana DePrima, and today we're looking at that bigger world through the business of farming. My guests are Maria Zordan and Max Morningstar, owners of MX Morningstar Farm in Claverack, New York, in Hudson Valley. Max came to farming after growing up in suburban Massachusetts, working in restaurant kitchens, and eventually training at the farm school. He went on to help build Sienna Farms into a substantial vegetable operation before moving to New York in 2014 to start a farm of his own. Maria's path was different. She grew up in an immigrant family where good food mattered. She spent several years living abroad, and I will tell you the rest of the story as we get into it. It's really cute. Today, MX Morningstar grows about 40 acres of certified organic vegetables. They sell through wholesale channels to restaurants, distributors, and other farms, and operate a year-round farm store. But what they've really built is a business, and that's where we spend a lot of our time in this conversation. We talk about the point when a farmer has to begin stepping away from some of the farming, how you know when it's time to hire, what the owner should actually be doing, and how wholesale, restaurants, distributors, retail, and other farms all fit together. It's a really useful look at what it takes not simply to start a farm, but to build one that works. Let's get into it.
I had been farming out in eastern Massachusetts, where I grew up, for about 10 years before deciding to move to New York to start my own business. And I had started and run a fairly large vegetable operation out there, and then moved here in 2014 and started our farm on a piece of land I was leasing in Copake, New York, so about 20 minutes from where we are now. And kind of threw spaghetti at the wall in terms of marketing, went to farmers markets. We built a little farm stand. We had a CSA. We did restaurant sales. We did wholesale sales. And during that first year, that's where I met Maria. We met at a farmer's market she was working at the time. Then early the next year, she moved up to the farm and started her role here, which evolved over time from what the hell am I doing to now being the majority owner of the operation. And then in 2019, we moved to the property we're currently on after I had met the owner, which is over in Claverack, New York. And we had been seeking a piece of property that we could own because we had really grown the business to the point where we needed more infrastructure, and I didn't want to build infrastructure if I didn't own the land. And we discovered this property and met the owner and worked out an arrangement to lease with an option to purchase. And we moved here. And the big thing that came of that was building out a retail store on the property. So we technically opened that in 2019, but it was really kind of like roadside stand vegetable thing. There was no door or electricity. We were only open a couple days a week. And then in 2020, we expanded. Right before COVID started, we had kind of said, all right, we're getting legit this year. And then COVID happened, and COVID was actually a real boon for us because the population of our county nearly doubled in a couple of months. People were looking for small stores to shop at. And we just had an influx of people who were very conscious about the quality of the ingredients they were buying. And we filled a niche here where there really isn't a high-end grocery store in the area. You know, we've got our Hannaford's and our ShopRite, And there's farmers markets, obviously, but in terms of a reliable year-round source of high quality ingredients and great produce, we kind of filled that gap. And that's really been the main focus for us. We grow about 40 acres of certified organic vegetables. A lot of it, if you were looking at the farm in terms of what it produces by weight, most of our products leave through wholesale channels, either to restaurants or through distributors or increasingly to other farms is a really big part of what we do. So we grow a lot of sweet potatoes, roots, potatoes, and winter squash that a lot of farms don't like to grow or don't have room to grow, and then sell those products to them for them to distribute it in their CSAs or sell at farmers markets. But if you were to look at the income side of the business, the majority of it comes from our retail operation, where we sell meat, seafood, frozen grocery items, dry goods, flowers, kind of anything you would find at a supermarket. But what we're really well known for is the produce and fruit offerings in the retail store, a lot of which is grown by us, but a lot of which is also purchased in from neighboring farms or further afield. It's kind of anywhere we can get really high quality goods is where we source them from.
We were always very particular at farmers markets with our displays. That was one of the things that, you find these farms here and there. You go to a farmer's market, you're like, wow, that display is amazing, right? We're not the only ones, of course. And that was something that we carried through into the store in terms of treating it a lot like a farmer's market and making it very abundant and fresh. And there's lots of retrimming and rewashing and everything to keep things looking nice. Everything is set up in the morning and take it down in the evening. And our customers really appreciate that, right? It's not 2 bunches of everything stuffed into an open fridge, which has its perks. You don't have to put them away, but it doesn't quite lend itself to a very nice shopping experience. And as produce growers, obviously have an affinity for knowing what is good and learning about other kinds of produce, things we might not be growing, like peaches or nectarines or whatnot, and figuring out like which varieties are good and which ones are we looking to buy in from the distributors we work with, and tasting things and learning things. Yeah, the store, I would say, has been really great for us financially, of course, but also just in terms of interacting with our neighbors, like broader sense, and customers, and seeing produce through their eyes. And I very much enjoyed having the store.
There's a big difference between growing great food and making great food consistently available. Anyone can appreciate a perfect tomato in July. The real challenge is creating a food system that delivers exceptional ingredients in the middle of winter. That takes storage crops, relationships with neighboring growers, careful sourcing, and the infrastructure to make quality dependable rather than occasional. For most consumers, all of that work is invisible, and that's where consistency becomes something much bigger than convenience. It becomes trust. What's really being filled isn't just a retail gap, but a trust gap. More and more people want to know where their food came from, how it was grown, and whether someone actually cared for it along the way. A place like this offers something that's become surprisingly difficult to find at scale: the confidence that someone has already done the work of curating quality on your behalf.
I'd like to go back a little bit, Max. Tell me how you grew up.
So I grew up in suburban Massachusetts, kind of in between Worcester and Boston. And I have a very big family. And one of the things that was always emphasized by my parents was the virtue of a good work ethic. And also because of growing up in the family I grew up in, it was very important that I went and found a job as soon as I could work.
How many kids in your family?
I'm the oldest of 13.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a wild ride.
As the oldest, you have to set the pace a little bit.
A little bit. I mean, in some ways it's harder because your parents don't know what they're doing, even more than they don't know what they're doing when they have 2 and 3 and 4, but they learn a little bit more every time. And there's a lot of responsibility, but I think it can also set you up in a good way for the rest of your life in terms of both Maria and I are oldest children, and we're very good at figuring things out on our own because that was kind of how we had to live our lives. So I started working when I was right around 14. I started bussing tables. And then eventually, all throughout high school, I was working in a kitchen. So I was a cook at a restaurant there, at a couple of different restaurants. And originally, that was what I thought I wanted to do as I was getting towards going to college time. And I was getting a little burnt out on working nights. I didn't like being inside. I was always an outdoor kid. And somebody suggested I try this educational program at a place called the Farm School in Western Massachusetts. And so I went, and the farm offered, I forget what it was called, but the adult farm training program. I don't think they're operating it anymore, but it gave a lot of really basic skills, from homesteading skills to vegetable farming to meat farming. So I had a kind of wide exposure there to the industry at large. And I never really looked back from there after starting that program. And I left that program and managed a small vegetable farm, again, in Eastern Massachusetts, not far from where I grew up, and then was approached by a guy I used to work with at the farm school, who was an instructor there, who was starting his own farm up again in the same general area that I was, and asked if I wanted to come and get it going with him. And that was Sienna Farms in Sudbury, Massachusetts. And started that farm with him in, I guess that'd be '06, and grew it from a small startup with just a couple of people kicking around to a fairly extensive 70-acre vegetable farm with 500 CSMA members and busy markets and retail stores. And eventually, the plan had long been to start my own operation at a certain point, and we reached that point there where I was ready to get my own thing going, looking for land opportunities, and brought me to New York.
Max's journey into farming also reflects something that's easy to overlook. Expertise in agriculture is rarely built all at once. It develops through a series of experiences that each contribute a different perspective. Working in restaurant kitchens offered an appreciation for ingredients. The farm school provided a broad foundation in agriculture. Managing an established vegetable operation taught the realities of running a farm day to day, while helping launch Sienna Farms brought the challenges of building a business from the ground up. Each chapter built upon the last, adding another layer of experience before he was ready to start a farm of his own. In many ways, that's how farming has always been learned, not through a single defining moment, but through years of steady observation, responsibility, and practice.
I'm going to ask Maria this question. So we're at the farmer's market. What happened? Let's hear this story.
Well, very initially, I actually thought Max was part of a strange cult because he hadn't had a haircut in a very long time. One of those first year problems, first year on the farm problems. And they were a new vendor at the farmer's market, which is a farmer's market that my mom had been going to for many, many years. And I had so happened to have just moved back to that town after living abroad for a few years. And I took on a weekend job, or on Saturdays after my regular Monday through Friday work, as a fishmonger, which was a very interesting experience. And Max's tent was just a few tents down. And I don't remember what brought us to meet the first time, unless it was me shopping for vegetables.
I think it was you shopping.
Yeah, and I started shopping, and Max started giving me a fabulous discount, which was anything you want for $5. And yeah, they just...
Then one day, Maria came up to the farm.
Up for a visit. I think there was a farm tour or something for CSA members. And yeah, then we just started dating. And I was very much between things at that point, and it felt like it all kind of came together.
How did you become a fishmonger exactly?
Oh, my sister, who is much younger than me, had been working for this fish vendor for a few months. And she was like, I'm going away for the summer. Do you want to take over for me for a couple of months so they don't have to find somebody? I was like, yeah, I'll make an extra $130 a week. That sounds great. Yeah. So I did that for a little bit.
And you had been traveling in Italy before?
Yeah, I had been in Italy for about 2 years. And then I moved to Toronto for a short amount of time, maybe like 8 months or so. And then I promptly ran out of money and moved back to the States.
And what were you doing in Italy?
Big picture, I was really trying to figure out what I was doing with my life. Day to day, I was working at a hostel on Lake Como. I did that for 2 seasons, spent time with family, traveled around a little bit. Yeah, I was, 22? Having a great time.
And you're the oldest of your family. There's not 13 of you, is there?
No, I have 2 younger sisters. Now everyone's moved back to Europe in one way or another. My parents moved back to Italy. I have one sister in France and one sister in the Netherlands.
Wow.
I know, they skedaddled.
Well, they knew you were going to call on them to help out on the farm at some point.
Probably.
They're like, we got to get out of here. And what about your siblings, Max? Are they farm frequent flyers?
So because of starting that farm in Massachusetts, where we were starting from scratch, a fair number of my siblings did actually come and work for me there over the years, including their friends. So that was kind of one of the ways we tracked down summer employees, was like, all right, talk to my brothers, see who had friends who wanted a summer job, and then we'd hire people. And so a couple of my siblings did learn to farm and stuck with it in one way or another. And in 2018, here we hired my sister Tess, who had done the same program I had done at the farm school, as our equipment operator. And so she moved out from Massachusetts and came to Copake and started farming with us then. My brother Will, who had worked for me for several years at Sienna, along with a good friend of his named Steph, they were managing a farm outside of Boston. And they moved out and joined us in
2021.
2021 and got married shortly after. So initially, it just started as me starting a farm with a few employees I had poached from Sienna and convinced to move out to New York. Turned into a family farm in a way that I hadn't really ever planned on. So now my brother Will and his wife Steph are kind of the production leads in terms of managing the day-to-day operations of vegetable production, obviously in close contact with us over it every day. And my sister Tess and her husband Brian now manage the retail operation. So Tess and Brian are the store managers overseeing the staff over there. And then there's Maria and I, who kind of bounce back and forth kind of wherever we're most needed.
It had historically been that we were very much more on the farm side. But in the past year or two, we've both, especially me, have been able to get away a little bit from that and focus a little bit more on retail or back of the house kind of stuff.
Yeah. One of the reasons we hired Steph and Will and specifically went to them and was like, come on, you got to do it. You got to come out here. One of the reasons was we realized that the business couldn't grow anymore if we kept managing it the way we managed it, where like we were doing all the farming and all the managing of all the different aspects of it. Even though we had somebody managing the day-to-day on the retail, Tess didn't feel supported in that role because we didn't have time to like have regular meetings and check in about employee issues and, that kind of stuff. So we had to figure out a way to step away from the production in such an intense way so that we could manage the whole business the way we're supposed to as the owners, right? Our job is to solve the problems that don't have obvious answers. And so we still do. Maria, especially in the last year, has been doing a lot more business management and retail work. But I have stepped away a lot from the day-to-day on the vegetable operation, but I'm still very much in it all the time, especially during the heaviest parts of the year. Like right now through July, I'll be fairly full-time on the farm and then step away to other things.
Did you say it's 40 acres?
The whole farm is, I think we have about 55 in management, and then we cover crop 15 acres every year and then grow 40 in cash crops.
And you're all vegetables. I mean, I understand your store, you bring in other things, but you are not doing livestock, right?
No, we don't grow livestock or fruit. We may start growing fruit someday, but for now, we're a produce farm.
The store obviously is starting to dictate a little bit more what we might want to get into in terms of some like strawberries or rhubarb or things that are high value and really necessary when you're trying to make a nice display and make everybody happy.
I think there are a lot of farms that I know and who I work with who are wondering about that transition point where it's really necessary to make that kind of shift that you mentioned. How do you know when that is right or when it's necessary? How can you tell?
When you're leaving income on the table, for us, it was, there are a lot of things that need to be managed here. Infrastructure. I do a lot of construction here, for example, right? I do most of the building and designing of the stuff that allows us to operate efficiently. Being on top of all the paperwork side of the business, right? And making sure that those things are getting handled in a professional way and making sure that we could grow the retail side of the operation. We felt like that store was never really gonna be able to grow the way we thought it could if we were constantly distracted growing vegetables. So for us, it felt like we were leaving money on the table by not expanding the retail store, by not doing the infrastructural improvements that allow us to. We run a very efficient, lean operation. I mean, it's a 40 acre vegetable farm, and we have 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 employees who run that. And that's a very high acre to employee ratio compared to a lot of people. And one of the reasons we're able to do that is because we spend so much time on systems that allow us to be efficient, right? So these are things that I was able to step away from on the production side and focus on building new coolers, new pack shed, expanding the store to increase retail sales, having more time to lend to the management on the retail end of the business to help with hiring policies, help with their infrastructural improvements, finding new vendors.
And also, we feel like we had talked about this a couple years ago. Like, you have to be ready to some degree, give up what you got into it for. And the same for me, where it's like, oh, I really do have 2 to 3 heavy office days a week. And that leaves me very little time to do not only what I like to do, but all the other things. But I run the transplant production and the wholesale part of the farm. And now recently have been in the store much more frequently, almost on a daily basis, just being there for the staff. And yeah, your job changes, and maybe what you got into farming for is not part of it anymore, but suddenly you're running a business and you have to put yourself into the spot where that labor is needed and then figure out, okay, is it time to hire an office manager or to hire another production manager or whatever it is? Because for us, the goal is really to grow the business in such a way that it can keep employing people and it can keep raising wages. And that is growth, right? For somebody else, it might be, no, I just want it to be me and my partner or my spouse, whatever it is. And actually, we're going to figure out a way for this to always stay small.
One of the more difficult realities of building a successful farm is that success often changes the very job you set out to do. Many farmers begin because they love working the land, planting, harvesting, and spending their days outdoors. But as an operation grows, the work gradually shifts. Time once spent in the field is replaced by hiring staff, building systems, planning infrastructure, managing finances, and making the strategic decisions that determine the future of the business. In many ways, there's an identity shift that comes with that transition. Success is no longer measured solely by how well someone can grow vegetables, but by whether they can build a business that supports employees, creates opportunities, and continues to thrive beyond the founders themselves. It's a change that can be difficult to embrace because it often means stepping away from the very work that inspired the journey in the first place. Yet, as Maria and Max describe, that evolution isn't a departure from farming. It's another expression of stewardship, one that extends beyond the land to include the people, the systems, and the community that allow the farm to flourish.
Obviously, there's a financial component to it because if you're not making enough money that you can afford to hire a manager, that is a barrier. Some people don't, as Maria was alluding to, some people don't want to continually grow their business, right? But if somebody else can do a job to 70% of what you can do it as, right? They can do 70% as good a job as you. Somebody else should be doing that job. You should not be doing that job as the owner, right? That's one rule. And the other is, does a problem have a defined outcome? If it does, somebody else can do it. If it does not have a defined outcome, that is your job to figure out. And if you're spending all of your time doing things with defined outcomes, then you're not using your time as an owner efficiently, right? Those are kind of the rules I try to go by. That's based on my own ambitions and being fairly flexible with what I do with my life as long as this is operating well.
So let's talk about your customers for a minute. Obviously, you've got your retail customers now. So those are face-to-face people that you're seeing, maybe repeat customers you're getting to know, but you have wholesale customers.
Yeah. So our wholesale customers can get split into our direct wholesale. So those tend to be mostly restaurants and some smaller grocers in the area. Then we have distributors. So we work with, I think it's 5 different distributors. Some of them are more of an a la carte model where they will pick up multiple times a week and it'll be a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And that's because they're getting these single orders from their customer. We have the direct customers, we have our wholesalers. One of them specifically is a wholesaler that we work with very closely and draw a plan for the season. So we do, to a certain degree, kind of contract grow for them, and they will pick up 4 to 5 pallets a week throughout the season.
And they're distributing that to others?
They are mostly distributing it to restaurants in New York City. And then our third class, I would say, is other farms. This tends to be for their CSAs, their farm stores. And for those customers, it tends to be a limited number of crops that they're looking for. It's potatoes, it's winter squash, it's sweet potatoes, and then sometimes some roots or specialty crops to fill in their CSA. But we see the bulk of that go out between September and December. So we're heavily a fall farm, which is why October is just our craziest month. We start with winter squash in late August into September, and then it's sweet potatoes, and then it's potatoes, and then it's tons of cabbage and carrots and beets. So we're lucky that this property that we moved to used to be an orchard, and it came with gigantic drive-in coolers. We retrofitted one to be our produce cooler 2 years ago, and now we got a grant to do the second one, hopefully specifically into a winter squash and sweet potato storage cooler. So we'll see how that works. And that gives us an advantage in shifting our wholesale operation not so heavily into the earlier months, but really pushing it, I would say September through March is when we just sell the most.
Are those restaurants, for example, are they learning about you through the distributor, or they're just like, listen, distributor, I need this, I want this, and they come to you and find it? Or how does that work?
Most of the restaurants we've worked with for a very long time, since probably back when Max used to go around knocking on doors and bringing a box of produce and saying, this is what we do, we're new. We haven't actively sought out new direct customers, new restaurants in quite a long time. Most of our effort right now is in working either with more distributors or with selling more through distributors. It's just the delivery part of that restaurant and local grocer is kind of what hangs us up a bit, because we moved away from having a driver and haven't quite figured out if we want to go back to being really big on direct. It doesn't quite work for the long-term goals of the farm, which is to keep decreasing our diversity. And therefore, when you send a list out that doesn't have, 20 to 30 items, it starts to be hard. You can't expect a restaurant to buy just cabbage and potatoes from you and for that to be worth the 40-minute drive, right? So as the store grows and we can keep growing smaller amounts of these diversified crops for the store and for CSA, then we can increase our potatoes, our roots, our winter squash, and funnel it through wholesale or through other farms. And that has been the primary reason as to why we haven't really tried to grow within the restaurant base. A lot of chefs in the area are bouncing around between either their own restaurants or ones they are working at, and they hear about us.
So tell me a little bit about your area. Obviously, in the Hudson Valley, there are other farms. And just overall, the overall ecosystem there. Like when I say, farmers suffer an invisibility problem, the people who are not farmers in the Hudson Valley tell me, not here. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of appreciation really for farmers. I hear that also in Vermont, for example, like there's a high passion, high consciousness. Tell me a little bit about the ecosystem that you're existing within.
Most of our customers are pretty farm aware. They're coming to us for a reason. We also have a CSA, 100-member CSA. I think that is, going back to talking about COVID being kind of a boon for our retail operation, one of the things that happened was there was a huge influx of people. Most of those people had been thinking about at least food for a while, and a lot of focus in the kind of gastronomic world has been on the quality of ingredients. So we ended up with a lot more people up here who are farm aware through a passion for food and cooking. So I would say that's mostly true that our customers and most of the people up here, if you go to the locals who aren't necessarily the people born and bred in Columbia County, they shop here also, but they are very farm aware because every single one of them worked on a dairy farm or picked strawberries when they were in school, right? So
they worked on this farm.
Right. Yeah. We've met people who used to work for the people who built the barn that we own now. Right. And so I would say it's a fairly connected community to what is going on here. I think Vermont tends to be about supporting Vermont farms, right? They're very much into their state and making sure that those dollars stay there. But I would say in general are pretty farm aware and care about whether or not things are good for us.
Come up and they want a nice relaxed weekend or week or month or whatever it is. And it's very much about grilling and cooking and local orchards. There's a lot of cookbook authors that live here, tons of very good restaurants that kind of aid in bringing the produce out and showing people, what is local, what is seasonal, and this is how you cook it, and this is why it tastes so much better than something from Cisco or whatnot. And I think people come up here and there's this kind of expectation that there's going to be a lot of very good food, and it delivers.
There's an abundance to the Hudson Valley that people are seeking, and a lot of it centers around food.
I think
Mhm.
that there is that kind of assumption. I mean, at least here in the Western Catskills, where people see a cute little restaurant and they walk in and assume that it has local products.
Great food rarely exists in isolation. It emerges from an ecosystem where farmers and chefs and distributors and retailers and consumers all influence one another, creating a culture that values seasonality, craftsmanship, and quality. When chefs seek out exceptional ingredients, they encourage farmers to grow crops that prioritize flavor over uniformity. When consumers begin asking where their food came from, retailers and distributors respond by strengthening relationships with local producers. Each part of the system reinforces the next, creating a cycle where quality isn't the exception, it's the expectation. In places like the Hudson Valley, that network has become part of the region's identity. Food is no longer simply something that is consumed, it's a reflection of the landscape, the people who steward it, and the relationships that sustain it. Visitors arrive expecting to experience that connection, whether it's through a meal at a neighborhood restaurant, a trip to a farm stand, or produce purchased directly from the people who grow it. Over time, that shared expectation becomes one of the region's greatest assets, shaping not only what is grown, but how people value the land, the farmers, and the culture that surrounds them.
But the
Yes.
reality between those restaurants and the farmers is that either those farmers are selling the majority of what they sell to the city, or it's just hard to get well, in the case of steak, for example, you want to have ribeye on your menu for your guests every 3 days that you're open on the weekend. And cows aren't producing enough of those in order to make it work out, right? Like there's a lot of other parts to the cow. So if the
Mhm.
restaurant isn't doing that whole animal, at least that's what I've heard, is that's why there's a big truck showing up that isn't coming from the
Yes.
farm.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, restaurants and farms it's really interesting how there's so much focus on it. They're like two parallel universes. I think this is why farmers and chefs get along so well, is like we all got into it for the satisfaction factor, not the money, right? And not the glory, but the inherent love of what we do. But it's difficult as a farm to work with restaurants, and it's difficult as a restaurant to buy from farms, right? We produce really high quality products, but like you're referring to with the ribeye, you want to put something on the menu that's going to be on there and be consistent for a certain amount of time. And we have gaps in production, right? And so they have to fill those gaps from somewhere else, whether it's another farm or a distributor. There's also a thing where restaurants, even the busy ones, they don't really move a lot of volume, right? It's not a volume based industry when we're talking about the kinds of things we sell to an individual restaurant, right? I've had how many conversations have I had with a new chef who's walked in and said, I can't wait to buy all your stuff. We're going to be a big customer of yours. And just me kind of in the back of my head saying, you have no idea what you're talking about in terms of like what big means to us, right? In terms of buying a volume of product, right? And I love our restaurants and we love how busy they keep us, and we're happy to deliver to them and sell them their 6 or 8 cases a week. That adds up. What moves and shakes around here, it's if you're a distributor that can move 4 to 8 pallets a week of produce, that's volume. That's what keeps the wheels greased here. But I do think it's difficult for them to source and for us to figure out a way to handle the logistics of this is not seeking out new restaurant customers, because not only is there, well, how do we get this to them? And what's our delivery minimum, or do we charge for delivery, or, what do we do? But then there's the AR side of it, right? Where we've got to send invoices and make sure those invoices get paid. That's fine. But I remember we have a local restaurant we stopped working with because the guy made me chase him around for $250. And it's just like, I just want to close it off of QuickBooks. Why are you making me work for this? And that's the kind of stuff that I think can be frustrating as a business trying to work with restaurants.
And especially when you're first starting out, because you'll take all the business and then you will wait 6 to 8 months to get paid. But I feel like we've kept all of our very good customers, and we probably would have transitioned out of direct wholesale altogether if it weren't for our local restaurants who we want to keep serving them. We want our produce in their kitchens, and we love them. We love what they do. It's difficult when we're buying stuff for the store, right? It's like you can understand why a restaurant is receiving 8 to 12 or however many price lists, and they all come on different days and they all have different deadlines. And maybe some of them only deliver on the day you're closed. It's a lot of work to be a restaurant owner or whoever it is that is ordering for the restaurant and making it all work. So I appreciate it very much that they put that effort in. And it's the same amount of effort we put in on the store when we work locally, because if we can find it locally, that's where we buy it.
What are some of the challenges that you guys are facing now? I mean, you're an established farm, you've grown, you've transitioned your dream jobs into very responsible jobs of business owners. When you sit in those big chairs now, what do you see?
It's funny because we're sitting at my desk right now, which is bearing the brunt of 2 managers on parental leave and me kind of filling in for them while they were gone. So I haven't got back into my office work other than putting out fires. I think I'm at that point, as we were talking earlier, where I am feeling like there is a job to carve out for somebody else within my responsibilities. And that should allow me to work on the things I've been wanting to work on, which is a new website and online ordering and working on more merch, 3-year plans and 5-year plans and getting back into financials. And for me, I've always really liked the visual part of the farm. And my hope is that I will have more time to do that in the coming years.
I think the biggest challenge is, as a business owner, or what it feels like recently, is that it never ends, right? We like tangible goals and we set them and we achieve them. But as soon as you reach a goal, the next one, it's a game of perpetually moving your own goalpost, right? And so every time I turn around, we need a new building for something. We need to fix some leak. We need to, whatever it is, right? There's always a contractor to call or a job to do. There's always more money to make. There's always new products to find. There's always new problems. You write a 5-year plan and you reach 5 years, and guess what you got to do, right? Like you just got to write another 5-year plan.
And that's just part of it. And you just have to, I think, lean into it. It can be really frustrating to feel like you never are getting to do the things that you have been wanting to do, because suddenly somebody is leaving or somebody quit or the building needs to be torn down and rebuilt, or, whatever it is. And you have to pick that up and do it. So I guess you are just constantly figuring out how to grow so you can keep hiring more people.
So explain to me a little bit what a restaurant like Westerly Canteen does, because they seem relatively small to me. They fit into your ecosystem in some way.
Historically, if I remember correctly, Molly has always picked up her orders. And so we also have that part of our business, which is pickup, which is phenomenal and great. And I love it. And she's also has done some retail shopping too for some specialty items and such. Yeah, we have quite a few customers that either don't work within our delivery radius, or maybe they really only do need a few things, right? And so they don't quite meet our delivery minimum and they come pick up and then they shop at the store. It's a great little ecosystem. And that's something I've been wanting to expand on a bit, because there is this pattern of personal chefs, cookbook authors, even just smaller restaurants or restaurants who are maybe just like forgot something or didn't order it, didn't get delivered, that come to our store. and they buy things, right? And so part of my plan is to set up an online store to help me with the wholesale management, which is lots of lists, lots of vendors, and consolidating it a little bit onto a website, but also hopefully being able to sell some of those things we have in the store to these customers. Because if you are catering or you're a personal chef, you don't necessarily need 24 bunches of beets. That's a lot of beets, right? Maybe you really just want 5 or 6, but also maybe you want some grapefruit or these very special pluots we have or whatever it is. And so, not that I necessarily want to become a distributor in that sense, but kind of merging the retail and the wholesale part just a little bit to offer something well-rounded for people like Molly.
We started this episode with a pretty simple question. What happens when things go really well? And I think Maria and Max gave us a much more complete picture of what growth on a farm actually looks like, well, at least than I expected. It can mean growing more food, but it can also mean building a cooler or a pack shed, hiring a manager, creating better systems, finding the right wholesale partners, figuring out which crops make sense at scale, and deciding where the owners themselves are most useful. For Maria and Max, that has meant gradually stepping away from some of the day-to-day production so they can manage the larger business. Their goal is to grow MX Morningstar in a way that allows them to employ more people and raise wages while building a farm that doesn't require the two of them to personally handle every job. We also got into the mechanics of the local food system, which are often a lot messier than the phrase farm to table suggests. Restaurants want local food, but they need consistency. Farms need customers, but delivering small orders to individual restaurants can quickly stop making financial sense. Distributors, other farms, wholesale buyers, and the farm store all become part of making those relationships work. At MX Morningstar, those different pieces overlap, with produce moving through wholesale accounts, restaurants, distributors, other farms, CSA customers, and their own retail store. And underneath all of it is the reality of running a growing business. There is always another employee to hire, another regulation to understand, another piece of infrastructure to build, another problem to solve, and eventually another 5-year plan to write. As Max says, it never ends. But that's also what a functioning farm business looks like. Not a farmer doing everything forever, but a business capable of adapting, employing people, paying them better, serving its customers, and continuing to grow food. Thanks to Maria and Max for taking us inside the business of MX Morningstar Farm today. You can find more about the farm and links to everything we talked about in the show notes. If you enjoyed this episode, I hope you'll follow One Bite is Everything wherever you listen. Leave us a 5-star review and a rating on Apple Podcasts if you can. And share this episode with someone who really wants to understand a little bit more about what it actually takes to keep a farm in business. One Bite is Everything is hosted and produced by me, your host, Dana DePrima. Sonia Dillon is my co-producer, and Russell Chapa is on original music and sound design for this episode and all others. Thank you for being here. At One Bite is Everything, a new episode comes out every Thursday. And until next time, remember, eat like it matters, because it does.